And welcome back to Plain Talk on CIOE 97.5 FM. Jeremy Akerman with Michelle Raymond and our special guest, Diane Weber-Bederman. Just before the break, Michelle, you were saying something.
Yes. No, we're just talking about, this great dichotomy that does exist, between people who recognize a secular ideology, whether it's politics, well, essentially a political and secular authority, versus those who recognize a religious authority or faith as being the dominant one. And of course, in Canada, in England, United States, and so on, we do not have a state religion which dictates state laws. But you talked about Muslim reformism, which is interesting because, just reading a little bit about your book, you talked about the Judeo-Christian tradition as being the foundation of modern democracy, or it's the values,
the ethic,
the values,
teachings, because the Bible as well, if I could say, Michelle, gives us the laws about business practices, politics, our court system. We got the Supreme Court from that. So it was a book of how to be a compassionate person in a compassionate society. You could believe in God or not, but the ethic remained true.
What I'm interested in is the talk about reform, though, because when you talked about business practices and so on, it sort of triggered me to the thing that I've always been really curious about is what has happened in modern society to the prohibition against usury. Usury being, as you probably know, the business of charging excessive interest and living on the interest from money which is borrowed. And actually, the Bible talks an awful lot about this practice. But
are you talking about the Gospels, the Greek Bible? The teachings of Jesus.
The Old Testament as well. And what I find really interesting is that in Deuteronomy, they talk about you'll not charge interest on loans to your brother, or interest on money, or food, or interest on anything. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not your brother. And then even just looking at the questions of usury and of various other punishments, there are real distinct traditions, there are distinctions in the Old Testament between the foreigner and the other. And so there has been a reform movement there as well. Now, do you think that the same thing is happening in Reform Islam, or do you have a way of predicting?
I honestly don't know, because the teachings in the Bible moved from a group of people that were trying to begin a new culture to the end where it became much more open, because you have to start off small and work your way. With Islam, Islam as a religion has its belief system. It's because they moved it into politics that they won't separate it that we have a problem. I don't know what Islam looks like without politics. And that's up to people like Rahil Raza. I don't know how you live a good Islamic life if you move away from the idea that you submit to Allah. Islam is more of a submission religion. Democracy, as taught by the ethic of Judaism and Christianity, and Judaism was the first idea that you have free will. The consciousness of the world prior to this ethic was that everything was predetermined, that life was cyclical, that you had no control over life. The gods flitted in and out, and there was no such thing as a beginning and end of time where you had a place in it. When Judaism came out, it said, you have free will. You must make decisions. The statement, will you choose life or death? That is the epitome of the teaching of you have free will. Now, what are you going to choose?
So you're saying that free will is that which is... Free will is the thing which distinguishes the Judeo-Christian tradition, you're saying?
The Jewish people, when they came out of the desert and brought this teachings that took a while to write down, taught that you have free will. That God, if we're going to talk about God, and I'll do that, but I don't want to get into religion, but the idea of an absolute being said, this is how you need to live. I'm telling you how you need to live. but I'm giving you free will.
How did
and you know
re-
that from the first story in the Garden of Eden, when they were told, don't eat that fruit, don't eat that fruit. And what did they do? They ate the fruit.
How did you
Yeah.
react, Diane,
Yeah.
when General El-Sisi, the president of Egypt, called upon his religion, his ideology, Islam, to abandon supremacism and jihad? And he said that if Islam abandoned those two, it could live harmoniously with the rest of the world forever.
If it gave up jihad and
supremacism. El-Sisi said it should abandon supremacism and,
Yep.
and jihad.
Probably, if they gave up the concept that you take all your information from Allah. I don't know. The truth is, I don't know how Islam will reform itself. Judaism has all kinds of sects. Christianity has all kinds of denominations. I think Islam, as I understand it, there's only one. And I don't want to put myself into their way of how to live. Democracy has enough problems on its own.
Tell us.
My fear is that Islam seems to feel, as it's practiced now in Canada, that you're not allowed to say anything that might insult Islam.
Now,
because
Diane,
in the Islamic countries, you're not allowed to. But to bring it to a pluralistic country, you have to let that go. There are ties.
You're
to
thinking
the
of
past.
you're thinking of the motion before Parliament recently,
Right.
aren't you?
Right. I'm very concerned about Motion 103 because I find it to be exceptionally divisive. And the point is that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms clearly declares, Section 15.1, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. That means everyone living in this country, legally, and I think illegally, has these protections.
So there is
So
no
if you
need for
start-
anything
I'm sorry?
additional.
So if you name one group special, Islam, you've made them outside all of equality. It's like you're equal plus one, and that's supremacy.
There was an amendment moved, was there not, to make it more general to include all religions and cultures, and that was
Yes,
defeated.
it removed Islam. Yep.
And that was defeated, wasn't it?
That was defeated by the liberals, yes.
Yeah.
And it's sad because that's divisiveness. Because I think we fail when we have people come to this country and don't feel or know in their soul that they are protected by the same law as anyone else. A Hindu, a Sikh, a Buddhist, a Taoist, a Janus, black, white, everything in between. Whether you're Catholic, Italian, it doesn't matter. Once you come to Canada, we are all equally protected. And if someone needs equal plus one, we failed.
Now, Diane, I can understand how some people might not totally embrace some of your ideas. And how has the book been received? And have you had any, I don't know what the word is, kickback from anybody who didn't like it?
Yes, thank you for asking, because I'm finding this, we have become so politically correct. Now, I live in a neighborhood where either the people are English Anglican or Irish Catholic. I mean, those are the two main things. And yet, these are the people that believe that tolerance, inclusion, and accommodation, it includes taking values that are not ours, that we would never accept. And I'll tell you about this, but like, for instance, we do not accept sex selection abortion in this country. At least we're not supposed to. But it is accepted in other countries. So if people come here and demand sex selection abortion because they did it in their other country, are we going to say yes to accommodate them?
How does this relate to how your book has
Yeah.
been received?
Okay, so we're talking about people who have accepted the idea that we are not nice to new people because we don't accept Islam. Now, there was a woman in my area who said that, however, She found the opinions expressed in my book unhelpful at best and destructive at worst to a healthy social conversation. And yet when I asked, could you please give me some examples, she couldn't. And then when I spoke to the woman who said she reviewed the book, and I asked her about the book, she hadn't read it. But what she told me was she had read the blurb on the back, and I'll read it to you. Not only are we under attack from those who hate our way of life, our Western culture is crumbling from internal pressures, from idolizing tolerance, inclusion, and accommodation to the point we welcome beliefs, customs, and rituals that undermine our democracy in the name of democracy. And she looked at me and she said, you were talking about Muslims. And I looked at her and I thought I'd gone down the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland, because the book is not about Islam. If you count the pages where I talk about Islam, out of 200, maybe 5. But I talk about Islam in the same way I talk about Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and the caste system, in order to point out that democracy differs from these systems.
You talk about both beliefs and traditions and customs. Do you make a distinction between a variety of beliefs and a variety of actual actions? I guess what I'm wondering about is, assuming that anybody who comes to Canada subscribes to the legal code of Canada, that which is the legal code, would you actually say that their belief system, whatever it may be, is a problem if it's not being, as they say, acted out?
In our world, in our secular world, you can have all your beliefs and privately in your home and in your place of worship.
Right, that's what I would think. Yeah.
When you start moving it into the public sphere, I start to get upset. For instance,
so
in
talking
Hinduism,
about undermining by beliefs may not be so much as talking about undermining by actual traditions, practices.
Right. So,
Yeah,
so
okay.
like Hindus believe that cows are sacred. You go to India, the cows are everywhere. So in Brampton, Ontario, there's a huge Hindu population. Well, you don't see cows walking in the neighborhood because that wouldn't be acceptable here. Despite the fact that a cow is extremely sacred, they know in Canada that they can't do in Canada what they did in India.
Exactly.
And on that
So-
note, I'm afraid we have to take another break. We'll be right back after these important messages.